The last stop. I was never the type to believe in ghost stories, urban legends, haunted buses. They all sounded like cheap horror flicks to me. But that night changed everything. I had just finished an exhausting double shift. The city felt dead, swallowed by thick fog, the streetlights barely cutting through the gloom. The only bus still running was the 2:17 a.m. route, one I'd never taken before. When it pulled up, the bus lights flickered, casting long shadows that twisted strangely on the sidewalk. I hesitated, just for a second. Then, telling myself not to be stupid, I climbed on. The inside of the bus was eerily silent. A handful of passengers sat scattered around, but they weren't normal. They sat stiffly, staring dead ahead, unmoving, unspeaking. The driver, an old man with pale, empty eyes, didn't even glance at me. He just closed the door with a sharp hiss. I found a seat near the middle, heart pounding louder than it should have. I leaned my head against the window, telling myself it was just exhaustion, just stress. Sleep pulled me under like a wave. When I opened my eyes, everything had changed. The bus was no longer moving. Outside, there were no city streets, no lights, no signs of life, just endless, dense forests stretching into darkness. I sat up disoriented, and that's when I noticed all the other passengers were gone. Gone. No sign of them. No sound. Not even a creak of a seat or a shuffled footstep. And that terrified me more than anything. I stumbled down the aisle, calling out, "Hello, anyone there?" My voice cracked. No answer. When I reached the front of the bus, I saw the driver's seat was empty too. The doors were closed, but they weren't locked. They creaked open at the lightest touch. I should have stayed put. I should have locked the doors and waited for daylight. Instead, like a fool, I stepped outside. Cold air slapped me in the face. In the mud, I saw a trail of footprints leading into the trees, too many to count. Some of the footprints were large, unmistakably adult, the soles deep and deliberate in the wet earth, others disturbingly small, like those of a child walking barefoot through the mud. They overlapped and twisted in every direction, forming a chaotic trail that disappeared into the woods like a path laid by something not entirely human. I hesitated just for a second, then stepped off the road and followed them, my breath visible in the freezing night air, curling like smoke in front of me. The forest swallowed me almost instantly, the darkness between the trees thick as ink, pressing in on all sides. It didn't take long before the whispers began. At first they were barely audible, a distant murmur, as though the wind itself was speaking. But soon the sound became more distinct, more pointed. They were whispering my name, not shouting, not calling, whispering soft, almost intimate, like they knew me. Shapes stirred between the trees, not animals, not people, something else. Their movements were too smooth, too quiet. I caught glimpses, pale faces half obscured by branches, their features twisted and wrong, eyes blank and glassy, like dolls abandoned in the dirt. They watched me, just watched. A surge of panic hit me like ice water down my spine, and I ran. I tore through the forest, branches slashing across my skin, catching on my clothes like fingers trying to pull me back. My breath came in ragged gasps, my lungs burning as the cold cut through me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from those faces, those voices. The darkness felt endless, the trees stretching on forever, I was beginning to think I'd never get out. And then I saw it. A clearing opened ahead, sudden and unnatural, and in the center stood the bus. Or at least, something that wore the shape of the bus. Its once white sides were now mottled with rust and filth, streaks of something dark and dry running down the panels. The windows were broken, jagged glass still clinging to the frames like teeth. The headlights glowed dimly, not illuminating anything, just staring like a pair of tired, sunken eyes. Inside, through the broken glass, I saw them. The passengers. They were all there, the ones I'd ridden with not so long ago, slumped in their seats, unmoving. Their skin was ashen, stretched tight across their faces. Their mouths hung slightly open, lips cracked, as if caught in the middle of a silent scream. And then I saw the empty seat. My seat. The bus door hung open, one side barely attached, creaking softly in the still air like it was beckoning me in, or warning me away. I took a step back, my whole body trembling. I turned, ready to run back into the woods, but the forest was gone. The trees had vanished. There was nothing behind me now, nothing at all, just an endless, yawning black void, stretching in every direction like the world itself had stopped existing. I stood there for what felt like hours, frozen, heart thundering in my chest. But in the end, I did the only thing I could. I stepped back onto the bus. The moment my foot touched the steps, a wave of cold shot through me, deeper than skin, deeper than bone, like something ancient had reached inside me and gripped my spine. My legs gave out. I collapsed into the empty seat. My seat. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My body wasn't mine anymore. I just sat there, paralyzed, eyes wide open, as the door groaned shut behind me. Then, without a sound, the bus began to move, gliding forward into the darkness, its wheels turning over ground that no longer seemed real. Now, every night, the 2:17 a.m. bus rides again, hunting the lonely, the tired, the lost. If you see it, don't wave it down. Don't get on. And whatever you do, don't fall asleep. I knew the signs. They say the 2:17 a.m. bus only claims the clueless, the ones who stumble aboard without knowing the warning signs, the ones who don't believe the old stories. But they're wrong, because I knew them all. I had studied every account, every deleted forum thread, every desperate comment posted in the dead of night. I knew how the bus hunted, how it waited for those foolish or desperate enough to make a mistake. I even carried a mental checklist, a ritual drilled into me after years of obsessive reading. First rule, never step onto a bus whose headlights flicker as it pulls in. Second, if the driver refuses to meet your gaze, turn around, walk away. Third, watch the reflections in the windows carefully. If they don't match what you see inside the bus, run. Don't question it. And fourth, always count the passengers. If you see more shadows than living people, it's already too late. These rules had kept me alive. I took night buses nearly every week, relying on them to get home after long, grinding shifts. I trusted my vigilance, and maybe that's what blinded me. It was just past 2 a.m. on a bone-cold Tuesday when I found myself standing alone at the Maple and Ninth stop. The streets deserted and the city drowned under a suffocating mist. The single street lamp above the stop sputtered and buzzed, casting a sickly orange glow that barely pushed back the darkness. I paced, breathing steam into the air, going through my ritual in my head once again. I was tired, but sharper for it, my nerves raw and on edge, the way they needed to be. When the bus finally appeared through the curtain of fog, its approach was slow, almost reluctant, like something alive and wary. I watched it carefully, heart beating a little faster with each second. The headlights burned steady. The driver, a middle-aged woman with lines of exhaustion etched deep into her face, glanced up at me, her jaw moving in slow, absent-minded chewing as she worked a piece of gum. Inside the bus, I saw a handful of passengers, scattered lazily across the seats. A man murmured into his phone. A woman scrolled through something on her device, her finger tapping rhythmically. A couple leaned together, whispering and laughing quietly. Everything looked normal. So normal, it almost felt wrong. Still, I approached cautiously, the checklist in my mind like a prayer. As I stepped closer, something caught my eye, a reflection in the window near the rear of the bus. A figure, tall and motionless, silhouetted against the dim interior lights, just standing there. No one was actually sitting there. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. The seat was empty. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. Maybe my mind, so attuned to dangers, was seeing phantoms where there were none. Maybe. The driver gave me a tired, impatient glance. The bus exhaled a low hiss from its brakes, almost like a sigh. Without fully realizing what I was doing, I stepped aboard. The doors closed behind me with a sharp finality that echoed in my bones. The overhead lights buzzed once, twice, before settling into a dim, steady hum. I chose a seat close to the front, never the back where I could watch the driver and the road. My skin prickled with unease, but I told myself it was only habit, only caution. The city blurred past the windows in smears of pale yellow and deep black. I tried to steady my breathing, watching familiar streets roll by. And then, slowly, subtly, the city began to vanish. The buildings thinned out, the lights dimmed, and then there was nothing but a vast, churning darkness pressing against the windows like a living thing. I shot a look toward the driver. She sat rigidly, staring straight ahead, her hands clenched too tightly around the wheel. Her face, reflected in the mirror above her, was disturbingly blank, as though the muscles beneath had forgotten how to animate themselves. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask where we were, but the words caught in my throat when I noticed her eyes in the mirror. They were wrong. Glass-like, too large, unblinking, no longer human. The realization hit like a blow to the stomach, and I turned sharply in my seat to scan the passengers. They were gone. Every single one of them. The man with the phone, the woman with the tablet, the laughing couple, all of them vanished, leaving the seats eerily empty, except for one. At the very back of the bus, slumped in a seat against the window, sat a figure. He wore the same faded jacket, the same torn jeans described in the oldest posts, the ones warning about the ones who never made it back. His head was bowed, his hair damp and matted against his forehead, and then, impossibly, he lifted his face. Ashen skin stretched tight over bone, lips cracked and dry, eyes wide and vacant, staring at me, not past me. Panic surged up, cold and overwhelming, and I scrambled out of my seat, nearly falling in the narrow aisle. I yanked at the stop cord. Nothing happened. I shouted at the driver, no reaction, not even a twitch. I pounded on the door with my fists until pain lanced up my arms. Still no response, no slowing, no stopping. And then the overhead lights flickered violently. When they steadied, the bus was no longer empty. Every seat, from front to back, was filled. The passengers sat rigidly, grotesque parodies of life, their hollow eyes all locked onto me. Their mouths hung slightly open, and a faint, almost inaudible sound rose from their throats, a soft, dry whisper like the rustle of dead leaves. It was then I understood the bus hadn't missed me. It had been waiting for me to think I could beat it. I don't remember how I got off. Maybe it threw me out. Maybe it let me go this time. I woke up lying in the wet gutter outside my apartment building, the street empty and silent, the mist thick around me. My phone was dead. My keys were still in my pocket. My watch blinked uselessly at 2:36 a.m. I stumbled inside, feeling colder than I ever had before, the kind of cold that sinks past your skin, past your bones, and into your soul. Later, when I checked the building's security footage, I saw myself stagger home alone through the swirling mist. But in the far background, caught just at the edge of the frame, were two pinpricks of light, headlights, waiting patiently at the curb. It stood there in the distance, silent and patient, the faint glow of its headlights cutting through the mist, as if marking its presence not for the world, but for me alone, always watching. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was something ancient and hungry, something that had learned to wait for the perfect moment to strike, to slip its hooks in deep when you least expected it. I had known the rules, had memorized every warning and every tale, had lived my life as carefully as a man walking a tightrope over a pit of endless darkness. I had done everything right, or at least I thought I had, and still, somehow, it had found me. And now, deep down, somewhere beyond reason or hope, I understand, next time it comes for me, it won't offer me a chance to wake up on the street. Next time, there will be no escape at all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It helps the darkness spread. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next nightmare. And remember, don't listen to the whispers in the dark.